大家好, this is Short Stories, brought to you by the Taichung Keda Language Center. I'm your host, Martin. Today's short story is called Sleeping Beauty. It's a very old fairy tale about a princess who is cursed to sleep for 100 years. The earliest known versions of this story date back to the 1330s. An Italian edition was published in 1634, and later a French version was published in 1697. The version most English speakers are familiar with is the Grimm Brothers version from 1812. Today's short story is going to be based on the French version. But before I start reading the story, I'm going to give you the vocabulary and vocabulary example sentences. After I have finished reading the story, I will read 4 listening comprehension questions. Let's get started. Vocabulary. Feast. Feast. Over 300 people were invited to the wedding feast. Splendor. Splendor. It is the castle that gives the scene such splendor. Avenge. Avenge. I must avenge the murder of my brother. Spindle. Spindle. A spindle is a tool used for spinning fibers into yarn. Be bound to. Be bound to. Your plan is a bad idea and is bound to fail. Spin. Spin. A long time ago, women had to spend hours each day spinning in order to make clothes for their families. Hedge. Hedge. The house was made private by a large hedge that surrounded it. Astonishment. Astonishment. You can imagine my astonishment when I saw the UFO fly over my house. Flicker. Flicker. The fire flickered in the breeze. Contented. Contented. After a long day at the park, the dog fell asleep with a contented smile on his face. Now for the story. A long, long time ago, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a king and queen. They had been married for several years, but still did not have a child. Everyone was becoming very worried. If they did not have a child soon, the dynasty would end and there would be no more kingdom. Fortunately, the 7 good fairies that lived nearby granted their wish, and a girl was born. The king was so happy that he ordered a great feast. He invited the whole kingdom, including the 7 good fairies. The feast was held with great splendor. Each of the 7 good fairies was given a golden plate and a silver cup to honor them. In return, the fairies said that they would grant 1 gift to the new girl. At the end of the feast, the fairies one by one gave the baby their magic gifts: virtue, grace, beauty, curiosity, health, wisdom, and before the 7th fairy could give her gift, the doors of the great hall slammed open. In walked a haggard-looking old woman. "Oh no, it can't be," said the first good fairy. "I thought she was dead," said the second. "Who is it?" asked the king. "It's the 8th fairy, and she does not look pleased," said the third fairy. The 8th fairy was not nice like the other 7. She was a mean, nasty fairy. She moved away many years ago, so no one thought to invite her to the feast. She wished to avenge herself for not having been invited, and without greeting or even looking at anyone, she cried with a loud voice, "The king's daughter shall in her 15th year prick herself with a spindle and fall down dead." And without saying a word more, she turned around and left the room. Everyone was too shocked to do anything. Soon the king and queen realized that their new daughter was doomed, and they both started crying. "Fear not," said the seventh fairy, "for I still have my gift to give." The king and queen smiled a little. "Unfortunately, I'm not as powerful as the eighth fairy, so I can't reverse the spell, but I can soften it." The seventh fairy gave the baby girl the gift of protection, which changed the curse. Instead of dying, the girl would fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. Afterwards, the king ordered that every spindle in the kingdom be burned. For good measure, all knitting needles and tacks were outlawed. The girl was never taught how to sew or crochet. The king wanted to keep his daughter as safe as possible. Despite her sheltered childhood, she soon grew into a gorgeous and charming young woman. Anyone who saw her was bound to love her. On her 15th birthday, the king and queen were called away on a diplomatic mission. The girl was left alone in the castle for the first time, and her curiosity started to itch. She explored every part of the castle, including the old abandoned tower. She climbed up the stairs to the top, where she found a haggard old woman sitting in front of a spinning wheel. "What is that?" she asked. "It's a wonderful new game," said the old woman. "Would you like to try it?" Without thinking, the young girl reached out her hand and touched the spinning wheel and, of course, pricked her finger on the spindle. The girl suddenly felt very drowsy and fell onto the floor. The last thing she heard was the old woman laughing. The king and queen were heartbroken. They placed her in a comfortable bed and cried for a long time. The king became so upset that he summoned the 7 good fairies. He told them that he was worried about what would happen to his daughter after he and everyone else in the kingdom died. He didn't want his daughter to wake up alone in an abandoned castle. "Maybe there's something we could do," said the 7th fairy. At that moment, all 7 fairies lifted their wands to cast the most powerful spell they could manage. They put the entire castle and everyone in it into a deep sleep. They would not awaken until the young princess wakes up in 100 years. To keep out intruders, the fairies also surrounded the entire castle in an impenetrable hedge of thorns and bushes and brambles. As time passed, the legend of the cursed castle and the princess inside grew. She became known to the locals as Sleeping Beauty or Briar Rose. One day, a prince from a nearby kingdom was riding past. He saw the huge thorn bush and asked the locals about it. They told him it was a cursed castle, but a Sleeping Beauty was inside. This intrigued the handsome prince. He went up to the thorn bushes, took out his sword, and began to hack away. Once inside the castle, he began his search for the princess. Eventually, he found her asleep in her magnificent bed. He leaned down and gave her a kiss on the forehead. At that very instant, she awoke. After talking for a while, they went down together, and the king awoke, and the queen, and the whole court, and they all looked at each other in great astonishment. And the horses in the courtyard stood up and shook themselves. The dogs jumped up and wagged their tails, and the fire in the kitchen flickered to life. In the end, the prince married the Sleeping Beauty, and they lived a contented life for the rest of their days. Now for the questions. Number 1. Why was the 8th fairy so angry? A. She had a headache. B. She wasn't invited to the feast. C. The baby princess was more beautiful than she was. D. The king owed her some money. The answer is B. She wasn't invited to the feast. Question 2. What happened when Sleeping Beauty pricked her finger on a spindle? A. She fell out of the tower into a thorn bush. B. She fell in love with the prince. C. She fell into a deep sleep. D. She said, "Ouch!" The answer is C. She fell into a deep sleep. Question 3. How did the prince wake Sleeping Beauty? A. He turned on her alarm clock. B. He prepared a cup of fragrant coffee. C. He slapped her face. D. He kissed her face. The answer is D. He kissed her face. Question 4. Why did the good fairies surround the castle in thorns? A. To make the castle more beautiful. B. To keep people out while everyone inside was sleeping. C. To keep birds from sitting on the roof. D. To keep the 8th fairy away. The answer is B. To keep people out while everyone inside was sleeping. That concludes today's short story. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. So thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.